With Nour Odeh. She's a political analyst and joins me from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Nour, it's always good to have you on this news hour. So Benjamin Netanyahu is in a bit of a tough position here. He's facing opposition among his coalition partners who really brought him back into power. Then it's the Israeli public. And of course, the global scale of this is that he's had so much criticism about what Israel is doing in Gaza. How do you think he's going to react as this pressure is most likely going to continue to mount?
Well, thank you for having me. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is only concerned with one thing, which is Benjamin Netanyahu. And so he will continue to rally the support of the far right in his government. He depends on them for his political survival. He knows that the Biden administration could get frustrated with him, but he is banking on the fact that that's as far as it will go. There will be no consequences, no real pressure, no price to pay for defying the Biden administration, for defying even signed agreements. Benjamin Netanyahu is ordering the commission of war crimes right now in Gaza, and he's facing no consequence. So what's one more violation? What's one more act of thievery of Palestinian funds in the West Bank? And that's why I don't think he will back down. And I think he will exploit to the maximum possible the fact that Joe Biden and the American political system as a whole will enter the election fever season this coming January, and it will become more and more difficult to apply any pressure on Netanyahu and the Israeli government during that season.
And of course, during that season, the focus will, of course, be on the elections coming up in November. And I think you make an important point there, speaking about there are no consequences, because it's not just now that there have been no consequences for Netanyahu, but for Israel for so many years, even though war crimes have taken place, even though they have broken international law, there are no consequences. And that just emboldens them, I would imagine, to continue to do what they're doing, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank.
Absolutely. There is a culture of impunity. There's a sense of entitlement in the Israeli political establishment that Israel can do what it wants. It can entrench its occupation. It can expand its elastic borders. It can annex territory. It can violate Palestinian rights. And no one is allowed to not even criticize such policies. And when they do, they are maligned and attacked as anti-Semitic, as pro-Hamas, as supporting terrorism, any one of the labels, the many labels that are used. Israel feels sure that it would never face consequences, even though it has been repeatedly accused by independent commissions of inquiry of committing war crimes and possibly even more. It has there's an advisory ruling of the International Court of Justice that was passed almost 20 years ago. There's an ongoing investigation at the International Criminal Court and proceedings at the International Court of Justice, also pertaining to Israeli violations of international law. And still, Western countries, primarily the United States and some of its allies, continue to insist on treating Israel not as a country that violates systematically international law, but as a close ally who's entitled to aid, to assistance, to protection, to armament, while it bombs civilian population and civilian installations.
And as the death toll in Gaza is nearly 22,000 as we speak, and probably higher, this war has to come to an end. So Egypt has drawn up a proposed plan. We know that a Hamas delegation will be there today. What do you think will come of those discussions? Because we know both Hamas and Israel are looking at this, and Egypt is hoping that it is a way forward.
I think the Egyptian efforts are extremely important because for Egypt also, this is a matter of national security. The ever-present danger of forced mass expulsion of the population from Gaza into the Sinai, which we're hearing more and more about, which I believe all Israeli actions are really geared towards, is a threat for Egypt. And so it has been very involved since day one. I think the component of the Egyptian initiative that has to do with Palestinian politics, with getting the Palestinian house in order, I think it would be the most difficult part to resolve, and perhaps it should have been dealt with separately, because I think ultimately the other parts are details. How this war, concludes, whether it's in, phased temporary ceasefires or one end of the war. The central question is how the political arrangement through which this war will end, and that will require Palestinian action, Palestinian consensus, Arab support, and also international buy-in. And so that's really the very difficult road ahead, where Palestinians will have to, get their act together, really, and make sure that they can move forward, end this war united. Otherwise, this is going to drag on for much longer, I would fear.
And Nour, I want to end by asking, on a personal note, as somebody who is Palestinian, you are living through this right now in Ramallah. You're seeing the horrific pictures that we are all seeing coming out of Gaza. What is this doing to the collective psyche of Palestinians who are currently in the occupied territories, but also so many in the diaspora who were forced to leave during that first Nakba? This surely is taking a toll on a people who have already been through so much.
It's a collective trauma like no other. My generation heard from our parents and grandparents about the Nakba, but this is a Nakba that we're living together, cross-generational lines, cross-geographical lines. It has brought back all the previous trauma and then some. And the feeling that the Palestinians have been forsaken, that Western governments, in their eyes, Palestinian lives pretty much are expendable, and that international law will only be used and applied when it serves a certain agenda. These are very, very heart-wrenching conclusions to take away for the Palestinian people as a whole, who are watching their brethren, their family members, their relatives, their loved ones being crushed by this genocidal war and being utterly helpless, unable to help them, unable to send them anything. No food, no water, no warm clothes, not even a tent to keep them sheltered, even at the bare minimum of standards. So this has been a very, very, a watershed moment, I would say, for the Palestinian people. Certainly, this people who are predominantly young. This is a transformative moment, one that will shape the minds, the hearts, and the perspective of Palestinians for many, many years to come.
Certainly will indeed. Nour Odeh, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.